Welcome to the channel. Hit subscribe and dive into stories that'll stay with you long after the video ends. Let's begin. Rain hammered the hood of Daniel's truck like a fist trying to break through, and for a moment he wondered if he'd taken a wrong turn or if the storm had simply swallowed the world whole. The wipers dragged across the glass in long, tired arcs. Headlights caught on sheets of water, turning the road into a shifting silver river. He slowed, leaning forward, squinting for the next curve. That's when he saw her, a white shape hunched on the shoulder, luminous under the flashing hazard lights of a disabled sedan. At first he thought it was a stray veil, some scrap of fabric whipped loose by the storm, but then it moved, lifted a trembling hand, and the truth hit him like a jolt. A bride. A woman in a wedding dress stood alone in the downpour, mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching the skirt of her gown, as if it were the only thing holding her together. She wasn't waving for help. She wasn't signaling distress. She was simply standing there crying openly as though the storm belonged to her. Daniel braked hard. His boots splashed into a puddle as he stepped out, cold water instantly running down his collar. "Hey, are you okay?" he called over the roar of the rain. The woman flinched, startled, then turned toward him. Her eyes were red, rimmed with panic. "Please," she said, voice trembling, I need a ride." Something in the way she said it made him pause, not fear, urgency. As if something behind her, something unseen, was closing in. He glanced at the abandoned sedan. Driver's door cracked open, hazard lights ticking like a metronome, no one else around. "What happened?" he asked. She shook her head violently. "Please, not here, just get me away from this place." The storm cracked overhead, a flash of white tearing the sky open. Daniel gestured toward his truck. "Come on, it's warm inside." She gathered the soaked lace in her hands and hurried with him across the slick asphalt. As soon as she climbed in, she locked the door with a sharp click. Daniel felt the hairs on his neck prickle. He slid in beside her, dripping, and shut his door. For a long beat they sat in the quiet thrum of the engine. Her breathing was shallow, unsteady. Raindrops ran down her veil like tears. "What happened?" he asked again, softer this time. She closed her eyes, pressing her palms together as if bracing herself. "I couldn't stay," she whispered. "I couldn't marry him." Daniel blinked. "Runaway bride, then?" Her eyes snapped open. "No," she said, "you don't understand. I wasn't running from the wedding, I was running from something else." A coldness slipped into the cab, unrelated to the rain. Daniel felt it settle in his chest. "Something else," she swallowed. "Someone followed me." He looked out into the storm, scanning the road, but saw only darkness and the blurred lights of her abandoned car. "Who?" The bride leaned closer, voice barely audible. "My fiancé," she said. "He wasn't supposed to know I left." Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Outside, another flash lit the tree line, and for just a second, Daniel thought he saw movement behind her empty sedan. Then the darkness folded over it again. Daniel's pulse thudded in his ears as he stared through the rain-smeared windshield. The storm softened everything beyond the reach of the headlights, turning shapes into shifting silhouettes. If someone was out there, the darkness was swallowing them whole. He cleared his throat, trying to steady his voice. "Is he dangerous?" The bride hugged her arms across her soaked bodice, fingers trembling as they dug into the lace. "You don't know him," she whispered. "No one really does. He hides it. He hides everything." She shook her head, a small, sharp motion. "I thought I could go through with it. I really did. But when I saw him this morning, something changed." Daniel didn't push her. Instead, he eased the truck into gear and pulled back onto the road. The tires hissed through standing water as they gained speed, leaving the abandoned sedan behind them. The bride kept glancing out the back window, breath fogging the glass. "What happened this morning?" Daniel asked. The bride hesitated. The wipers thumped. Rain drummed the roof. When she finally spoke, her voice was thin, stretched tight like a wire. "He was in my dressing room before the ceremony. I didn't even hear him come in. He just appeared in the mirror behind me." Daniel felt a shiver creep up his spine. "And he smiled," she said, staring down at her hands. "But it wasn't his smile, not the one people see, not the one that won me over." She paused, eyes distant. It was like he'd been pretending the entire time, and for a moment he let the mask slip. Daniel swallowed. "Did he say something?" "He told me," she said slowly, "that after today, everything would change, and I wouldn't need to worry about anything anymore. Not friends, not family, not choices." She looked up at him. "He said he'd take care of all of it." Daniel frowned. That sounds controlling. Her voice cracked. It was a threat. I felt it. I don't know how to explain it, but something in his eyes, something cold, told me he meant every word. The truck jolted over a pothole, snapping them out of the moment. Daniel gripped the wheel more firmly. "So you ran?" "Yes," she said, as soon as he left the room. "I took the back stairs, grabbed my keys, and drove. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed distance. And your car died." Her laugh was hollow. "Of course it did. The universe has a sense of humor." Daniel nodded toward the glove box. "There's a towel in there, might help." She pulled it out, dabbed her face, then stared at the soaked fabric. "I must look insane." "You look scared," Daniel replied. "That's not the same thing." Another glance in the rear view. Another breath caught in her throat. "Can he track you?" Daniel asked. Her jaw clenched. "He tracks everything." The truck's headlights swept around a bend, illuminating the road ahead, and Daniel suddenly sucked in a breath. A black SUV sat parked on the shoulder, lights off, engine idling faintly beneath the storm. The bride's hand gripped his arm. "That's his car," she whispered. Daniel's foot eased off the accelerator on instinct. The black SUV sat too still, too deliberate, like a predator waiting in tall grass. Rain streamed down its windows, distorting the silhouette inside, if there even was one. The bride stiffened beside him, breath catching. "Don't slow down," she whispered urgently. "Please, just keep driving." Daniel pressed the gas again, not enough to draw attention, but enough to carry them past without hesitation. As they approached, he kept his eyes forward, refusing to glance at the SUV, though he could feel its presence like a hand pressed against the back of his neck. The bride turned her head just slightly toward her window, peering through the streaked glass. "He's there," she murmured, voice cracking. "I know he's there." The truck rolled by. For a few long seconds, the hum of the engine was the only sound between them, until a faint flicker of red glowed in the side mirror. Brake lights. Daniel's stomach dropped. The SUV had come alive. He didn't speak, just pressed harder on the gas. The bride saw it too. "He knows I'm with someone," she whispered. "He's not going to let this go." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He's not touching you, not tonight." The road curved sharply ahead, vanishing behind a wall of trees. Thunder rumbled low across the hills. The bride's knuckles whitened around the towel in her lap, twisting the fabric with every jolt of the truck. "How far is the next town?" she asked. "About 15 minutes," Daniel replied. 15, she repeated as if calculating something. "If he catches up before then." "He won't." But even as Daniel said it, the dark shape of the SUV appeared in the mirror again, this time closer, its headlights still off, gliding like a shadow across the wet highway. The bride's voice dropped to a whisper. "He always said I belonged to him, that no matter where I went he'd find me." She swallowed hard. "I didn't think he meant it literally." Daniel gripped the wheel. "Look at me," he said. She turned, eyes trembling. "You're with me now, you're safe." She nodded, but the terror in her gaze didn't fade. The truck barreled forward, tires splashing through newly formed streams. A fallen branch scraped the undercarriage with a sharp crack, making them both flinch. "Storm's getting worse," Daniel muttered. "I picked a great day to ruin my life," she said with a shaky laugh. "You didn't ruin anything. You made a decision, and you got out." Another glance in the mirror. This time, the SUV was closing the distance faster. Daniel felt heat rise in his chest. "Okay," he murmured. "We're not waiting for him to catch up." He flicked on his turn signal, then veered off onto a narrow service road that disappeared into the woods. Mud splattered against the wheel wells. The bride stiffened. "Where are we going?" "A shortcut," Daniel said. "Old forestry road. Locals use it all the time." She peered behind them. The SUV shot past the turn, continuing down the main highway. Relief rushed through the cab, but only for a second, because the bride suddenly went pale. "He knows this road," she whispered. "He took me hiking here once." Daniel's grip tightened, and then echoing faintly through the storm, they both heard it, the low growl of an engine turning back. The sound rose slowly at first, blending with the storm, almost easy to dismiss, until it grew louder, closer, unmistakable. An engine pushing hard through mud and gravel. Daniel's pulse jumped. He turned around. The bride breathed, clutching the dashboard. "He's coming this way." Daniel leaned forward, eyes narrowed as the forestry road tightened into a winding trail between towering pines. "He's going to have trouble catching up on this terrain. These roads aren't friendly to anything big and heavy." "But he's stubborn," she said. He never lets anything go, not ever. The rain fell in wild sheets now, blurring the trees into shadowy pillars. Branches whipped at the windows. The road was little more than a dirt spine crawling up the hillside, slick and shifting beneath the tires. The truck fishtailed slightly, then steadied. "How much farther?" she asked, voice wavering. 3 miles, Daniel said. "There's an access point to the main road at the top of the ridge. Once we hit it, we'll be in the clear." She nodded slowly, swallowing her fear, but her eyes kept drifting toward the rear window as if expecting to see headlights burning through the storm. A loud crack split the air. A branch slammed against the hood, bouncing off in a spray of leaves. The bride gasped. "Just debris," Daniel muttered. "Storm's tearing everything down." Not a minute passed before the sound returned, this time a deeper, angrier rumble. The bride's breath hitched. "That's him," she whispered. "He's close." Daniel risked a glance at the mirror, nothing but blackness and rain, but the sound, it was unmistakable. A powerful engine grinding uphill. He pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck bounded over a rut, jolting them both. "Hold on." The bride grabbed the handle above her door as the road narrowed even further, sloping upward at a steep angle. "He won't stop," she said. "He told me once that if I ever tried to leave him, he'd make sure no one else ever had me." Daniel felt a flare of anger push through his fear. "He doesn't get to decide that." She stared at him, eyes wide and wet. "You don't know what he's capable of." A thunderous roar erupted behind them, so close it made the rear window vibrate. Daniel's breath caught. Headlights burst into view like twin stars cutting through the chaos, bouncing wildly as the SUV tore up the trail behind them. "He's right on us," the bride cried. Daniel swerved to avoid a fallen tree limb, tires slipping, mud spraying in every direction. The truck lurched sideways before catching traction again. "He's trying to push me off the road," Daniel said through gritted teeth as the SUV edged closer, closing the gap with frightening speed. The bride's voice broke. "Please don't let him take me back." He didn't answer. He couldn't. Every ounce of his focus was locked on keeping the truck upright as they climbed the treacherous slope. The SUV rammed them lightly from behind. A sickening jolt. The bride screamed. Daniel fought the wheel. "We're almost there, just hold on." But then, as they rounded the final bend, the headlights illuminated something that made Daniel's heart drop. A massive fallen tree blocked the entire road ahead, stretching from bank to bank. The bride's breath escaped in a trembling whisper. "No, no, no." And the SUV's engine roared behind them, closing in with nowhere left to go. Daniel slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded sideways in the mud, sliding toward the fallen tree until it stopped just short of the massive trunk. Rain hammered the windshield. The bride clutched the seat, her breath coming in sharp, terrified bursts. Behind them, the SUV's engine roared once, then cut abruptly. Silence, thick, heavy, fell between the echo of thunder. Daniel didn't wait. "Out," he said. "We're going on foot." The bride hesitated only a second before nodding. They threw open their doors and plunged into the storm. Mud sucked at their shoes as they scrambled around the front of the truck. The fallen tree loomed like a wall, bark slick and dark beneath the rain. Over it, Daniel said, "Go." She lifted her drenched gown, struggling to climb. Daniel boosted her by the waist as she pulled herself up, sliding over the trunk and tumbling down the other side. Daniel followed, landing in a crouch beside her, chest heaving. A car door slammed. The bride froze. "He's coming." Daniel grabbed her hand. "This way." He tugged her toward the trees, their footsteps lost in the roar of the storm. Branches whipped their faces as they slipped into the shadows. Behind them, a voice bellowed through the wind. "Emily." The bride flinched violently at her name. Daniel tightened his grip. "Keep moving." They crashed through a curtain of underbrush until they found a narrow path winding between the trunks. Daniel guided her down it, half pulling her as she stumbled in the mud. Her breath trembled with every step. Lightning flashed, and for an instant the forest lit up bright as midday. Emily cried out. Her fiancé was only 30 yards behind them, a dark silhouette breaking through the brush, his eyes fixed and furious. "Emily, stop," he shouted. "This isn't what you think." They pushed harder. Daniel felt his lungs burning, but they didn't have a choice. The path sloped downward sharply, the mud turning slick as ice. Emily slipped. Daniel caught her, pulling her upright. "I can't," she gasped. "Yes, you can," he said. "Just stay with me." Another flash lit the woods, and this time they saw something ahead, a structure, small, dark, resting at the bottom of the slope, an old ranger's shelter. Daniel pointed. There. They half ran, half slid toward it. The shelter's wooden door hung crooked, but it stood. They stumbled inside, Daniel shoving the door shut just as Emily's fiancé reached the clearing. His footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, like he already knew he had them cornered. Emily pressed herself against the wall, shaking. "He's going to kill me," she whispered. Daniel reached for a rusted metal bar leaning near the door. "Not while I'm here." The shelter shook as a fist pounded the door. "Emily," the voice boomed, low and seething. "Open the door, we're leaving now." "No," she whispered, tears mixing with rainwater. "I'm not going back." Daniel braced himself. Another blow splintered the frame. "Emily," the fiancé growled, "he can't protect you. No one can, you're mine." Something inside her snapped. She stepped forward, voice trembling but loud enough to carry through the storm. "I'm not yours, not anymore. You don't own me." Silence, then a crack of wood. The door gave, swinging inward as the fiancé lunged inside. Daniel moved first, swinging the metal bar with every ounce of desperation. It connected with a thud. The man staggered, knees buckling, collapsing into the mud just outside the threshold. Emily gasped, covering her mouth. Rain poured over the still figure. Daniel tossed the bar aside, chest heaving. "Let's go," he said. "We're getting to that main road." She nodded, tears streaming, relief and shock warring in her gaze. She reached for his hand, and together, feet slipping, clothes soaked, hearts racing, they walked out of the shelter and into the storm toward the first glow of approaching headlights from the distant road. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and visit the channel for more real-life stories.